So now we're to the frequently asked questions. Oh yeah, so Abbott's executive order. I was, like many of you, I was just cheering when I saw the headlines. Oh, Abbott, it just popped up on my phone, Epic Times and Texas Scorecard, Abbott bans vaccine mandates from private employers. And I was like, oh man, I gotta look at this thing. So I open it up and read it, and it says that no entity in Texas can basically can force you to get the vaccination if you have an objection based on a conscientious objection or something like that, based on your religious belief or a medical exemption. So reading that, I was just like, okay, well that just kind of really just goes back to the employer. You still have to allege a religious reason for your conscience, for your conscientious view, your conscientious objection, and a medical exemption. It's really the same thing, but the only difference is if your employer denies your request for an accommodation, they get fined. And I was like, oh, that's great, they get fined. That'll deter some employers. And then in the order it says find the maximum amount under government code, whatever it was, like 178 something. So I look up government code, whatever it was. And it says the maximum fine under this section is $1,000. And I was just like, oh, okay, all right. Well, to me, I don't know what you think about Abbott. I'm personally not a fan. I was just like, well, it doesn't really do much. It kind of seems like he's just like, I'm going to do something. I'm going to make it look like I'm doing something, which in my opinion is typical Abbott. And sure enough, and I got a lot of flack for taking that opinion, but almost none of my clients have seen their employer budge because of Abbott's, because of this executive order. Now I've heard some people say, oh, my employer's not thinking about it, but the large employers, they're just like $1,000. Who cares? That's less than they pay a lot of their employees in a week. So they're basically just, it's a slap on the wrist. So that's Abbott's executive order. Not too helpful. But that kind of does lead to a point I want to make, which is we need the Texas legislature to step in and do something about this. And they're having hearings this week. I wanted to make it down and testify, but I've just been so busy helping clients I couldn't do it. But we need the legislature to take a much stronger stance than this executive order. I've seen the draft of the bill, and I think it's like a $5,000 fine, which in my opinion is still not enough. But we have to make it clear to our, call your rep, call Governor Abbott's office, call Dave Phelan, and tell them what you think. We need protection. We can't just sit around and, like, a civil remedy is not enough. We can't just have the legislature saying, oh, you have this right to sue. Well, how is that going to help me? I can't pay my bills while while a lawsuit is pending. I think we need criminal penalties on these corporations. It is criminal. They're violating not only our federal constitutional rights, but our Texas constitutional rights. You should have to take a moment and read the Bill of Rights in the Constitution of Texas, because it is very strong, and it is very clear you cannot be compelled to do this. So I would say, criminal penalties. I want to say if I were Abbott, I would instruct my Secretary of State, hey, these businesses don't get to operate in the state of Texas if they're going to deprive our citizens of their constitutional rights. One thing I thought of, what did Abbott do during the pandemic? He closed down all of these businesses because of COVID. But you're telling me now he doesn't have the same right to close down all these businesses when they're threatening the jobs of tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of employees in Texas? If he's so for choice, why is he not using that same power that he had during COVID to put a stop to this? I would say he didn't have the authority to close all those businesses, but if he's going to use it, why not use it for this? Anyway, just my opinion. Okay, can my employer require me to close my vaccination status? We did that. Can my employer make me get a regular COVID test? That's just kind of a negotiation. Maybe they'll allow you to do that. You can make the religious objection, like I said. I work remotely, does this help? We covered that. That is a great accommodation. Oh, if I've already had and recovered from COVID, that's just an additional point you can make in your letter requesting an exemption. I'm not really a risk to anybody else. like we said, but in addition, I had the virus, I recovered from it, I have antibodies. We actually have a lady here tonight who will give you a little finger prick test and tell you if you've had the virus or not. She'll be out in the lobby after this. And so that's just an extra, I'm not a danger. I have the antibodies, and that's just kind of an extra thing you can say. Let's see, is it true OSHA's going to fine my employer if I'm unvaccinated? So yeah, the OSHA thing. We haven't seen those OSHA regulations come out, and it's been a conspicuously long time, in my opinion. How hard is it really to draft something that says you gotta mandate the vax if you have over 100 employees? It doesn't seem that hard to me to write that up, but they still haven't done it. And if you want to know my theory quickly, I think that they are a little bit worried that the Supreme Court is going to strike that down, and if that happened, it would be huge. You all heard the term, I'm sure, the deep state, the administrative state, the administrative agency. So what has been happening in our country, and this kind of touches on what Brandon was talking about too, our government has over time become more and more authoritarian, and they have done that through the administrative agencies. This all kind of started back with FDR, with the New Deal, and he created all these alphabet agencies, and Congress gave them broad powers to impose regulations to reasonably enforce the congressional acts. Well, back in 1935, there was a case called Schechter-Poultry, and the Supreme Court actually said, you know what, that is a violation of the separation of powers in our Constitution. The Constitution vests sole legislative authority, lawmaking authority in Congress, not in the executive branch. The administrative agencies are for the executive branch. So Congress, you can't just abdicate your lawmaking authority by giving a blank check to the executive branch and the administrative agencies. So that's the problem with this OSHA thing, and that was the first thing I thought. I was just like, he said he's gonna have OSHA mandate this? I was like, that is lawmaking. You can't just have an administrative agency just make a law and force everybody to get vaccinated. And I think if that got struck down by the Supreme Court, that would really damage the ability of the administrative state, the deep state, to basically bypass the legislative process. So, I genuinely do. I almost hope they do it, because I want to see the Supreme Court take up that case. And then, let's see, I'm a federal employee, does this make any difference? So, if you're a federal employee, you have actually more protection, because these laws that we've talked about, Title VII and Chapter 21, they are employment laws. And this is disappointing, I'm sure, for a lot of people to learn, but it's an important point. I've seen a lot of my clients say, they'll send me a letter that they drafted, and it'll be like, I have a constitutional right not to do this, not to get this. And, again, I agree with that. The only problem with that, and this is why the government is having all these private businesses do their dirty work, is because, believe it or not, the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, it protects you against the government. It doesn't protect you, except in very narrow situations, against private individuals, against private companies. And so there is a statute that you can sue a private entity for violating your constitutional rights, but it is almost impossible to prove. I mean, you have to show dang near borderline criminal activity. It's really difficult. So that's not really, if you're telling your employer you're violating my constitutional rights, you're right, but it's just not, you don't really have a cause of action, so it's not legally, they're not. But if you're a federal employee, then guess what? That is the government violating your constitutional rights. So you can sue a federal employer for violating your First Amendment rights. It's called a Bivens claim, and it's named after a famous case called Bivens.